Matt Goulet, thanks for joining the Entrepreneurship Handbook podcast.
Thanks, Michael. I'm very excited to be here today. Been a fan of the text content and happy to see the podcast kicking off, and really thankful for the opportunity.
Awesome, man. Yeah, thanks for joining again. Yeah, thank you for your time. And just for the audience, if it's your first time visiting or listening in, tuning in, watching on YouTube, the Entrepreneurship Handbook podcast. This is where we deliver stories, business stories from across the industry, delivering inspirational, entrepreneurship tales with actionable takeaways. So we're super proud today to have Matt Goulet, CEO, founder of Kernal. Matt, I'll just kind of let you kind of give the background give yourself a little bit of a background, and then give yourself a little bit of intro to Kernal, because we're dying to know what you do and what Kernal does.
Yeah, definitely. I had a interesting journey into entrepreneurship, which I think, if that's how I would define it, it's always interesting. It's always unique. I did a software engineering degree, at a time when the industry was really blowing up in social. And I always wanted to build a $1 billion social media company, and figured that going and doing a software engineering degree was the best way to do that. And then becoming an engineer at a FAANG company was the best way to do that. I ended up failing my last class of software engineering. Didn't get my opportunity at Amazon that I had really tried to line up to go into Seattle. I'm from the Vancouver, Canada area, so it would have been close to home, but ended up taking a job in the music industry as an assistant, post-engineering degree, which much to my family's disappointment, but I think it definitely made me who I am today. And fast forward 10 years later, I've been the CEO of a couple different venture-backed startups. I've worked as a product manager. I've worked as a head of product. I've spent a lot of time working on digital products, mostly in the consumer space, not as much in the social space. And, today I'm the CEO of Kernal, which ultimately we're trying to solve a problem where we think that there's too much friction in finding investment as an entrepreneur. And we think it's really hard to find, the right deal flow as a VC or as an investor. I think it's really hard to productize something that is so human. How do you productize a warm introduction? And, we're actively searching for an answer to that. And it ends up taking a lot of hands-on white glove work, which is really what we do. We have the only incentive at Kernal we have is to help founders get investment and to help, investors find really good deal flow. And we don't take a percentage of any of that. We are a sponsor-run business. So if you're a sponsor listening in and you want to participate in our next demo day event, where we've got some amazing speakers lined up and some amazing companies, feel free to hit us up. But that's the crux of what we're doing. We've been a few different versions of that over the last 3 or 4 years. We started out as an ideas platform, trying to kickstart entrepreneurs to get that side project going, to go start that business. We saw a lot of activity in that, but as anyone who's listening has raised venture capital money goes, you have to build a business. It can't just have some usage. So fast forward to us building this demo day platform where we started working with accelerators and VCs. And we slowly realized there was an opportunity for us to really curate our own and build a real media business around this that showcases, amazing talent in all sides, whether you're an investor or a founder.
Amazing. You mentioned the productization of like that kind of human experience. Could you explain that a little bit, and how Kernal is like overcoming those challenges from something that's such a in-person experience and trying to, digitize that, put it like online? I only imagine, like, even from the founder's perspective, like how challenging that is to go from the idea of pitching in front of investors on a stage to doing it online. What are some of the challenges you're facing, and what does that actually mean to digitize the human experience there?
Yeah, I think that we've gone through a shift in the last 5 years in venture capital and investment. Obviously, we've gone through a shift in remote work post-pandemic and the rise of Zoom and all of these amazing tools like StreamYard that we're using today, and what we use at Kernal as well. I think that the human experience was forced to go online, and now we we've had to figure out how do we retain the elements like this, where we can have an actual conversation still, rather than it being a product that forces us into it. And so, the productization of the warm intro sounds like such a buzzword you would hear in Silicon Valley. It's like, we're productizing the warm intro and removing the barriers to the democratization of venture capital. That's a line that's probably come out of my mouth half joking at some point over the last few months. But I think that you have to allow room for organic conversation. And so it can't just be, hey, here's my startup, clicked if you want to invest, right? You have to have, a form field for organic conversation. And we believe that looks like a live experience. There was a company that had, quite a bit of success doing this. And we took a lot of inspiration from how they were handling these things. Ultimately, they decided to move in a different direction with the product. But, we feel now is a great time to really showcase founder stories. And I think that everyone wants to believe in a founder's vision. I think with the rise of so many of, the tools we're seeing in the AI world today, anyone can become a founder so quickly. And how do you differentiate between 10 products that look the same? Well, it's an amazing founder story. And so really showcasing the story in that live format, I think, keeps that human element, rather than, hey, here's my pitch deck, take a look, let me know if you want to have a call. How we achieve enough scale to showcase enough of these stories so that it's not extremely limited. We've got that on our roadmap. So I think that looks like a lot of short form content. I think that looks like going a little further upstream from what's currently existed in the investment market. So like, hey, like, what can you growth hack with $5,000, right? Normally you've seen things like the Teal Fellowship. Hey, here's $100,000 to drop out of college. And that creates a great story. But what can somebody do with a laptop and a GPT subscription and some cloud credits now? I think, I do have this philosophy that we can help create amazing stories if we're able to, find that $5,000 via a sponsor, or it's something we end up running on our own through a fund. What can you do with that? And how do we capture those stories? I think there's a lot of companies out there that are trying to productize this warm intro. We see a lot of investor lists and private newsletters and those sorts of things. And I think those things need to exist. And they're amazing opportunities for the founders that end up getting into these newsletters, or the VCs that end up, being on the receiving end of the deal flow. But it's just another walled garden, gate-kept experience, which actually adds more friction to the entire ecosystem. And while I think it needs to exist, we're really looking at trying to create more of an open ecosystem. Hey, here's my story. Do you want to invest?
Got it. No, that makes sense. It's nice that part isn't, not to say any part is being stripped away, but the part that remains, I guess some of the most interesting parts about like founders is the story. And so that's still there. That's still a key component of this process. It's like who they are, their story, beyond just, like you said, like, here's my pitch deck. Will you invest in me? You still have to come across with like a good story, obviously a good business that hopefully aligns with that, but there's still that human aspect to it, which is I think is really cool. Yeah.
I think what's interesting is we've been trying to identify, I did 25 founder calls last week, and like, how do I scale this up so I'm not the gatekeeper, right? And we started thinking about, is there an exercise we can put founders through that seems so trivial that helps them understand how cool and important their story is? And, my last startup I founded, I raised $4.3 million in a really hot space at the time. And if I was asked to do this task, it would have taken me some time to figure out. It's like, explain your business in 5 to 10 seconds. And if you can't do that, you need to rethink your business. And so when we think about how we're taking inbound from startups now, it's like, hey, sure, give us your pitch deck. I'll always take time to speak to a founder, but like, give us that 10 seconds and like, let's see how interesting you can make 10 seconds. And I think it's a really trivial, simple exercise that could end up changing the trajectory of how a founder thinks about their business. Because I don't think I could have done it at my last business. I truly don't. I think I was in such a hot space. I was trying to go in all these different directions, like trying to differentiate myself from the 100 other companies that were doing the same thing. And it ended up sounding like a short out of Silicon Valley if I had tried to do that. And I went through this exercise before I got on the podcast. So, I think that's a great way for anyone listening. Like, regardless whether you want to come join the Kernal ecosystem or not, like it's a really good exercise to practice in the mirror. Like explain my startup to myself in 5 to 10 seconds. That makes sense for someone that knows nothing about it. It's the simplest way, I think, to get market validation from yourself.
Absolutely. I don't know why it sounds more frightening than anything else to, like, pitch myself than to pitch someone else. Yeah.
I know. You have to overcome imposter syndrome. You have to overcome imposter syndrome, right? And I think that as an entrepreneur and somebody that works in technology, when you tell someone who's in their 50s or 60s, they expect you to say, oh, you work at Facebook or Netflix or SAP or one of those sorts of things. It's like, oh no, I'm an entrepreneur. And then all of a sudden, the moment those words come out of your mouth, you start deflating because you're like, I haven't had the same level of success that I was expecting to have. Like myself, we thought I was going to start a $1 billion company out of college, right? And if you do that to yourself enough times in the mirror, you feel less and less deflated every time you're having those conversations outwardly. And it's so funny, you should be excited about it. Like you've taken a way bigger risk than anyone else. Probably in your family, probably in your friend group. There's not as many of us out there as there are employees at some of these larger tech companies. So I think it's something really admirable and something that, if you're working hard and you're working smart, like the success will come. It might take you 10 years, it might take you 15 years, it might take you 20 years. But if you continue to evaluate your process and you're able to get rid of that imposter syndrome, there's light on the other side of this.
Absolutely. And it sounds like, what better way than to, pitch, through Kernal. How can entrepreneurs qualify, or it sounds like a hybrid between a Shark Tank and a pitch contest. Like, I think you mentioned that a little bit too, is like that analogy around being like Shark Tank and stuff. It's like, how does a business kind of, qualifies, or casting call, or how often does this happen?
Yeah, so we do these every third Thursday of the month. I have a philosophy that, Mondays, everyone's dreading to catch up on email. Tuesday, you probably have some internal meetings. Wednesday, you've got some stuff you have to get out. And then by Thursday, you want something interesting. And there's a lot of great content in the tech world. I think that I used to spend so much time on Twitter following it. And then as it's gone more and more short form and more voices have come on and it's got noisy, to recurate my Twitter feed, I haven't actually put in the effort to do that. And I started thinking, where's a place where I can just find really interesting new personalities, and decided to build it. So when we're looking at startups, anyone who's in the pre-seed to Series A range that's looking to raise money, that wants to get themselves out there, we have an open pitch application for any event. Like I said, we review everything that comes in. We reach out and speak to most founders just because we view the ecosystem as a positive sum. So if we're able to get you an introduction to an investor or find an investment and you don't even make it on a pitch event, that's still net positive for us because we're helping increase the value in our ecosystem. So we've got open pitch events that you can go and apply. We'll make sure we get the links out for all the listeners. And then as far as what we're looking for, anyone who's willing to tell their story, as I said, it's hard. It's not an easy thing to do, but I think that even if you don't get what you're looking for from a pitch event, as far as investment or advisors or customers go, I find you end up coming out of it feeling like you did something really good. And that's how I've always felt about pitch events. But as I said, our goal is to find you your next 10 customers, your next 10 investors, your next 10 advisors. We've got 16,000 investors in our community that have signed up for our newsletter. We try and get between 1,000 and 2,000 RSVPs per event. These are all people that are either going to be investing in your business or advising your business, or potentially, becoming a customer. We try and focus on vertical specific days. So we've got kind of a consumer fintech day coming up. In July, we're going to be running more of a B2B event. So I would just stay up to date in our community. Go make an account on the Kernal website, take a look at what's going on, and try and find when your vertical is coming up. And you can always email me, Matt at Kernal, or just apply on our dedicated pitch events.
Super helpful. Thanks for that. And the folks behind, I guess the judges counter, how are kind of judges selected, or who are they? Is it a collective or a committee? How is that kind of organized?
Yeah, so it's funny when you're making a pitch event from my seat, it's a bit of a chicken and an egg problem, right? Do we have an amazing founder that we want to showcase and then try and build the event around them? I think, we always try and, see what's coming inbound from our founders, right? We want to work with people that have been in our network for a while. One of the companies that's pitching in our upcoming June 26th event was able to growth hack his way to the top of our homepage of like trending startups. And so when we see something like that, we go, okay, this guy gets a shot. Look at what he's done. And then you look into his business and he's got like 10 million in ARR. And you're going, what an amazing story this is, right? The business is called Tribeam. The founder, Akshay, is amazing. We're super stoked to have him on there. And so then we go, okay, like what else in our network fits within, the same, let's call it a vibe. And then we cold email some people and just say, hey, like, are you interested in this event? This is what we're doing. And we generally get a pretty positive response. I think that the brand and the experience just sounds a little different than what people are used to. These aren't 2.5-hour pitch events. This is like rapid fire, 45 minutes. There's prizes, like you might be getting something like AirPods if you're just in the crowd. The winner of the pitch event is going to have something from our sponsors. So it's just a little different. I think it reminds me a little bit of what was going on with HQ and Scott Rogowski back in the day, but really hyper-focused on a specific vertical, probably a la what Clubhouse rooms were doing in this world. So, there's another founder that's coming in the next pitch event that even before I was with Kernal, we stayed in touch, and his name is LJ, and he was like, had this really cool Instagram growth hack that I knew was going to nail it. And sure enough, I see him go viral a week ago because he just launched the business. I'm like, oh, I knew that. And I didn't want to reach out to him because I was like, well, I just don't want to come crawling back now. I talked to him 6 months ago. What am I supposed to do? And sure enough, he emailed me and was like, hey, Matt, I just want to let you know I went viral. I was like, dude, I saw. I was like, do you want to come into this pitch event, June 26th? He's like, I'd love to. And so it ends up just falling into place as soon as you find a one. Like most things do in startup land, it's kind of like, I call it teacups on chopsticks. You're trying to balance 100 teacups on 100 chopsticks, and you're constantly trying to catch them all. It's really fun, to be honest. And then you end up with this. We end up trying to foster these communities long term. So we'll make a group chat for the founders that were in our, let's call it a cohort. It's kind of like a mini accelerator. The investors generally want to meet other investors that they haven't met before. So we're really trying to foster community building at the same time throughout these events for people. So we're not trying to find 4 investors that are all friends and know each other. Generally, it's like, hey, you guys haven't met yet. Why don't you do a panel together? Let's see if we can foster that connection. And they're always going to remember, like, hey, this came through one of those Kernal events, and it's brand building for us.
Got it. Yeah, that's actually, I had one quick question. It's just, and then a follow up from that. Is this a worldwide event? So founders from all over the world, or are we just focusing on the US for now?
This is a US focused event. I mean, we're based in Vancouver, Canada. Again, it's vertical specific, right? And so if these founders, if these investors have a thesis of where they invest, we'll generally look for companies in our potential cohort that fit within that. But yeah, we definitely will look at any startup from anywhere. We believe in a decentralized internet, decentralized idea of forming companies. I think anyone with a great story, please apply. There's no requirements from countries.
Good to know. And from the receiving end, where it's like when the investors are hearing these pitches and these stories, how have investors received this type of delivery? Have they, has there been any, pushback against, this is just, this is like an online deal rather than meeting in person? Is there any difference? What's been the reception from the investor side?
I think a lot of investors in our existing network have enjoyed this experience because we see a lot of repeat attendance. I think the feedback that we've received, if anything, has been like, keep going more in short form, make this more gamified. When you come onto our platform, you can click to indicate investment interest. You can click for an introduction. You can click to say, hey, I know someone you should meet. And so we definitely have social features that you probably wouldn't find elsewhere. It's not like you can raise your hand like you're at Sotheby's in a real life pitch event and say, I want to invest. And you can do that here, right? And it becomes a bit of a game between the startups, like how much investment interest can they get? We've got a live chat feed. You end up seeing a lot of people who have either invested in the product already that are supporting in the chat or via the social actions. One thing that I think is a value add for startups doing something like this versus relying on their existing investor network I always felt like this. When your existing investors are introducing you to a new investor, it's a sales email, right? Because they're so heavily invested in your business. They need you to raise more money, is the way that the VC model works. And so with us, like we don't make money on the deal flow. We make money on the content. And so, it's actually like a better receptacle for a VC to come find deal flow with us, because we're not selling it. We're selling you on the story, and it's up to you whether you think it's investable. Like I have no skin in the game. So I think that's like the one difference is it removes some of that kind of in the back of your head. Oh, Matt's only emailing me because he owns 4% of this business. And it actually gives the startups a bit of a head start. And maybe I'm being a little cynical there. I think everyone wants to see people win, but it does remove a little bit of that in the back of your head. And it's generally why we try and avoid having panelists that have holdings in any of the startups that are going, because we want to make sure there's true, honest feedback and, no one's getting a lift.
Makes sense. And to your point around not having a lot of skin in the game, but obviously creating this community between founders and investors, how are you guys looking at a revenue model? How are you looking for a growth on that side and, keeping the operation, keeping the lights on there?
Yeah. So like I said, we are a platform, but our economics look traditionally like a media business, right? We rely on sponsorships. As we move forward, we're going to start looking at what it looks like to become advisors to startups that do come through our program and trying to look at potentially more of an accelerator model ourselves. But we do believe that potentially should require investment from us. So I think when you look at a business like ours, you have to go two directions, right? You have to go the financial services route and put together the deals if there's enough investment interest. And ultimately, I think that is prohibitive for founders because a lot of funds won't invest in an SPV. And so we don't want to eliminate any opportunity for our founders to potentially get investment on platform. And so we've chosen not to go that direction. The other direction is, we charge for access to the platform. Again, we don't think that it's not frictionless enough. I think that I've said this before. Founders are bad customers because they need to be bad customers. Their companies are great customers, but founders themselves are bad customers because they don't have any time for anything else. All they need to be doing is running their business and finding investment as far as venture backed goes. And so I can't build a platform and charge a founder for it because they're not going to use it. And a VC doesn't care what the UI or UX looks like. They just care about the deal flow. So for us, we need to make sure this stays super smooth and free to use. So right now we are focused on traditional media business. We do not want to go into the financial services route. However, our business does look very interesting at a fund level for fund level economics. And so that is something we're looking at doing, is raising a fund, because we are starting to get such amazing deal flow with this new format. And we're finding that there's a lot of businesses, some of our investors and myself personally want to invest in. So I think that's probably where the direction Kernal goes, and helping find that next version of founders. So the $5,000 3-day accelerator, whatever that looks like, buying someone a laptop and a GPT subscription, as I said earlier.
Yeah, and talking about the finding those kind of founders, the ones that stand out from the rest. What are some of the characteristics of some of those founders that you look for? I know it's obviously different across different verticals, but are there kind of similar characteristics between founders that you see are ideal, or the kind of they're the top founders that everyone wants to invest in? What are some of those characteristics that you see?
Well, it's funny. I think you can put people in two buckets as an entrepreneur. What did they give up to do this? Right. And so whether that was a good job or friendships or relationships or whatever that is, what did they give up to do this? That's one bucket. The other one is they had no other option. Right. So you come from a disenfranchised community. You come from a place that doesn't foster education as well as, as lucky as I was in Canada. Right. And either one of those, if you were to just bucket entrepreneurs into one of those two categories, there's a serious level of commitment because you've given something up or you have no option. And I think anytime I hear a story in either of those, and I'm sure I'm not thinking of every vertical an entrepreneur can come from, but when you have enough conversations with founders, whether it's, hey, I used to work at Amazon and I decided to come build this because I was passionate about it, or hey, I got out of a shitty social situation or socioeconomic situation and built this because I had to. Both are equally inspiring and equally great stories. I think any founder who's willing to get on a random Zoom with someone they don't know and tell me about their business, like that's what I'm looking for, right? That takes a lot of courage. It's the hardest thing about being in this world is fundraising. As somebody that's done it a few times, it never gets easier. You never get over this idea of asking for money because, again, you have to get over that look in the mirror of like, my business is worth something. I think that can get inflated a little bit, as we've seen with some of the massive rounds that have not ended super well. We don't need to get into names or anything, but you have to keep yourself in check at the same time. And it's a balance, but you have to start. The only way you end up raising too much money and overvaluing and blowing up is because you were able to get over that hump in the first place. So that it's kind of irrelevant.
That's one of the best explanations I've heard, honestly, in those two categories that you mentioned. You said giving something up or you had no other choice, right? They're either in one of those buckets. And you do hear a lot of those stories. Like you said, someone gave up a big job at Google, Amazon. I think I'm kind of more in that second bucket where it's like, I didn't have a choice. This was like the only, and didn't have an option B either. It was just like, this is it. I got to like make this happen. I got to make this SaaS product a thing. I got to scale it. I got to grow it and sell it. Definitely on that journey, but it hit home whenever you mentioned those two categories. I don't think I've ever heard that explanation before.
Yeah, listen, it's hard. It's hard. And I think we've glorified some of the I think we've glorified things that didn't need to be glorified as part of this journey. Like, I think we glorify the hustle culture a little bit too much. Like, I think it's super important to have a healthy lifestyle. And that includes like having time for yourself, like getting in the gym, getting outside, having positive relationships that aren't work relationships. Like, what we need to glorify is that idea of like, do you know what I gave up to start this business? Do you know what I gave up? You realize I had no other option to start this business. I'm not qualified for Facebook or for Google or for HBO or any of these businesses. And I think that's the stuff we should be glorifying because it gives people that inner mantra, like, I can do this, because like, even when you're, at the finish line of raising your money or making your first $1 million or making your first $10,000, making your first sale on the internet, you never quite feel like you've done enough. I think I hadn't really thought about it like that either, but I know I fall into the same bucket that you do. And so, but I admire my friends who have left their positions at some of these other places just as much. And I know they admire me. They're like, man, like you built this because you had no other choice. So maybe that's one thing we take away from this podcast and iterate on a bit more, because it is a good thought. Yeah.
And I guess the person who's in both buckets is kind of like a unicorn. They both gave up something and they had no other option. So
yeah, well, exactly. So
be on the lookout.
Be on the lookout for that. That's a great investment criteria.
Investors, get your checkbook ready, and someone hits on both of those buckets. If someone lands in those buckets, you struck gold.
Exactly.
And behind, this is a great program. I really love it. I think it's kind of what the industry's been needing for a really long time, without, quite honestly, like taking itself too seriously. It's like you said, you've been in a space where you've raised money, you've seen the difficulties. It's not an easy process. Founders, a lot of the times, are in the business. They don't have time or they don't have a lot of time to spend in pitching, cold emails, referrals. Although I'm not, no discredit to anyone who has had to go through that, because you did the hard work, and if you did receive funding through that, then perfect. But Kernal seems to like really kind of level the playing field when it comes to asking for investment or being in line to have these opportunities to be in front of investors. Is that something that, obviously you're passionate about it, but do you feel that this is kind of the way of the future, and other, pitching events will follow suit? Or is this something you kind of want to collaborate with these other, like, pitching programs to be like, hey, instead of, doing it your way. Like, let's just kind of shift the paradigm a little bit and do it kind of the Kernal way. Like, what's kind of your strategy for reaching some of these traditional kind of accelerators or incubators? And I mean, you may be taking some of their audience or not, but yeah, what's kind of the approach when you think about, competing in that space against a very traditionally like focused, like industry, if you would?
Yeah, so that's the best part about us. We actually have great relationships with accelerators because we run their demo days for them. And so we white label our Kernal deal room platform for accelerators. So any accelerator investor listening that wants to host their own demo day, hit us up. We have an enterprise product there. It's a really, really great way to engage your community. If you want our help bringing our community into those events, we're more than happy to. One of the best parts about the Kernal experience is, yes, we do have that immediate experience, log into deal room, pay attention to the event, but we have post-event pages with the recordings and all of the metrics from the event that we end up seeing up to 80% more engagement on. And so we hosted a demo day for an accelerator called Marl last week. Went amazing. They were focused on their community coming in for the live event, but someone from our community came in and indicated $1 million in investment in one of the startups on the post-event page the very next day. And so we work really well. We play nice with others. I think about us as like a TEDx model of what we're trying to build. We are obviously nowhere near that brand cachet, but I think if you think about how the content gets distributed, Kernal is going to have Kernal branded events where we really cater to things that we're passionate about. And then anyone can license the product to go build their own version of this, because I think, again, the format that we're trying to build is what's so important, of like showcasing founder stories, allowing for super easy introduction and indicate investment interest, or hey, I want to use this product, right? It's also a great opportunity for people to find their next 100 customers, depending on what their product is, and give product away for free or discount it to say, hey, I need someone to use this. Like, we're a great place for that. So we definitely play nice with others.
Very nice. Yeah. It's amazing to think like where this has come, where this is like how long it's come and how long this industry's evolved. It's cool to think like you could be potentially, and this is just me, I'm just throwing it out there because the Kernal model is just like so inspiring to be like, if someone could be on a stage, literally like pitching through, one of your partner programs, accelerators, and it could just be streamed across the world to like investors everywhere. Like that would be, I imagine like that's it. Like that's the future, right? Of like potentially scaling at that level.
And so we do simulcast live events. And so, we have accelerators that come on, that will give us a date that they want to do something. And if they have an AV team already in place, all they have to do is plug into our system. And so they can simulcast their live demo days. We had 2 last week that did that. And, we have anywhere from 3 to 6 events per month on platform. Some are open, some are closed. Again, we want to respect the communities that we are hosting via those licenses. So we only get involved if we get asked.
That's amazing. That's super cool. Yeah, I definitely would love to tune into one of those. Yeah. So I have a couple more questions for you, and thank you again for being on. This has been so valuable. First question is, around the one second, let me just looking at my notes right here real quick. Yeah, okay, so I'll ask the second question first because the first one evaded me. Do you ever think of a world where you did go to you did pass that class, you work for Amazon, how things may have been different in your life, and how and would you ever consider going back or having that alternate universe life compared to what you've built today?
Yeah, well, I guess it puts me in that other bucket. What would I have had to give up? And looking at Amazon's stock price over the last 11 years, I think it would be a futile experience for me to think back on giving that up. Right before we got on here, as cheesy as it is, I was just trawling LinkedIn, and Roger Federer has a quote, "What's behind you is behind you." So, while yes, you think about it as a juxtaposition and I guess, some pain for myself every day. You can see behind me, I have my software engineering degree from McGill University, and right below it is my offer letter for $28,000 a year as an assistant in the music industry. So I like to remind myself of the decisions I made, because I think we all make these decisions, whether they're conscious or subconscious. There's a reason I failed that class. That's on me. That's for not studying or putting myself in the position to succeed. And maybe subconsciously, I knew that living in Seattle, where I didn't have any friends, and maybe too close to home, is just not something I wanted. I don't know that for sure, but I think that I'm very happy with where I am today. I think the hardships you can go through trying to start multiple businesses and not succeeding to the level that you see on the internet, right? This idea that everyone who's under the age of 30 has a 9-figure agency that they've made, that they have their Lambos or they made their options on GameStop. And I find every story just as admirable as the next, to be clear. But I think it's made me the man I am today, and will continue to do so for the person I want to be going forward, and the father I want to be to my kids, and the mentor I want to be to the future founders that come across my desk.
Yeah, and you're certainly building a legacy and helping so many businesses along the way. So it's so amazing what you're doing. And yeah, it's nice to know that you landed up in this universe. So thank you for all that you've done. And as the last question, what takeaways would you recommend to the audience in terms of just maybe just like your experience, or just takeaways that you would recommend for founders who are thinking about, applying for or signing up for Kernal? What are just kind of some key factors you would recommend to folks thinking about signing up for Kernal?
Yeah, as I said, we'll make sure we get the links out properly, but come make an account. Email me, Matt at Kernal. I've seen just about everything that you can expect if it's going to go wrong in a venture-backed startup. And that's not a badge of honor. That's a badge of, let me help, and I'd like to share my story. I think a lot of that came from my own decision making. And I think it's important to be able to support people that feel like they're at a crossroads, which is really what we're here to do. Like, our job is to create success stories. It's better for our business if people come to us and say, damn, they got me my advisor. They got me that $50,000 check, or, hey, they got me that $2 million round. We want to create those success stories, and our product doesn't need to do it. Our team can do it. Right. So just get in touch if you need any advice. I do have a book recommendation for the crowd that's listening to that. Oh man, he told me to look at myself in the mirror and pitch the startup in 5 to 10 seconds. It's called The Courage to Be Disliked. It's a fascinating book. The story is the story goes, it's a young Japanese man who goes to an old Japanese philosopher at the base of Mount Fuji and tries to convince him how complicated the world is. And the old man keeps telling him how complicated the world isn't. And there's a lot of little tidbits in there they're really applicable to being an entrepreneur and a founder, but even more so to life and a way to live a peaceful life, because you won't find peace in your career. I can tell you that.
Well said. Well said. Thank you for that recommendation as well. And we'll definitely share those links to Kernal as well. And if folks want to get in touch, where can they find you online?
Yeah, you can find me, Matt Goulet, on Instagram. You can find me, What's Good, Goud, on Twitter, and Matthew Goulet on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find. There's one other guy that kind of looks like me with the same name, but I think I have curlier hair. So that's what I'd suggest. Instagram, email, Twitter, LinkedIn. I'm everywhere.
Right on. Well, Matt, thank you so much for being on the pod. This was amazing. We got a lot of good takeaways. Folks, you've heard it first. You know where to find Matt online. Matt, thanks again. I appreciate you for being on.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michael. This was awesome.